focus on a critical and often overlooked aspect of corporate dynamics: the role of unconscious bias in promotion decisions and its profound impact on perpetuating gender disparities in the workplace. The insights discussed in this presentation are drawn from extensive research and compelling statistics from both corporate Canada and America. However, it is important to note that the patterns that have been uncovered are not exclusive to any industry or nation, but rather resonate universally across various sectors and countries. So, numerous employment equity studies have consistently shown that women, racialized persons, and people with disabilities remain largely concentrated in the lower levels of organizations, and that upward mobility continues to be a problem. So the graphic on the screen comes from the 2023 edition of the Women in the Workplace report by McKinsey and Lean In. It is one of the most extensive and highly cited studies to date. This study collected information from 276 organizations in Canada and the US who employ over 10 million people. They surveyed more than 27,000 employees and 270 senior HR leaders. Their findings, summarized in the graph, highlight the stark contrast between the entry-level and C-suite positions, where women make up 48% of entry-level jobs, achieving almost parity, but only 28% of C-suite roles, emphasizing the obstacles to upward mobility. The graph also indicates that there has been sluggish progress for women at the manager and director levels, with representation growing by only 3 and 4 percentage points respectively since 2018. And despite the faster growth seen in senior leadership, women still represent only 1 in 4 C-suite leaders. Notably, at almost every step of the corporate ladder, the representation of women of color diminishes at a more significant rate than that of white women. For example, where women in general make up 1 in 4 C-suite positions, women of color make up just 1 in 16. This truly underscores the challenges faced by diverse groups and the critical role of race considerations in attempting to remedy these numbers, something that will be considered towards the end of this presentation. One of the biggest takeaways from the Women in the Workplace study is that the broken rung is the greatest obstacle women face on the path to senior leadership. For the 9th consecutive year, women face their biggest hurdle at their first critical step up to manager. As depicted by the graphic on the slide, for every 100 men promoted and hired to manager, only 87 women are promoted and hired. The disparity intensifies for women of color, with only 73 women of color making the leap to managerial role. Progress for early career Black women remains the furthest behind, with only 54 Black women promoted for every 100 men this year. This imbalance results in more women getting stuck at the entry level and fewer advancing to more senior leadership positions. So the broken rung not only obstacles immediate progress, but also has lasting repercussions as it shapes the entire talent pipeline moving forward. Because of the gender disparity in early promotions, men end up holding 60% of manager level positions in a typical company, while women occupy only 40%. This initial imbalance creates a domino effect where, with fewer women at the managerial level, there are significantly fewer women available for promotion to senior manager positions. Thus, even when hiring and promotion rates improve for women at senior levels, as we have seen happening over the past few years, the overall number of women in these positions never catches up because there are simply too few women to advance. In addressing workplace disparities as a result of gender discrimination, legal frameworks play a crucial role. So this section of the Ontario Human Rights Code, for example, establishes the right to equal treatment in employment without discrimination or harassment. It includes protections against discrimination on various grounds, including sex, gender identity, and gender expression. The ground of sex also includes a broader notion of gender, which, according to the Ontario Human Rights Commission, can be described as the social characteristics attributed to each sex. Gender-based discrimination in promotion decisions would be considered a violation of this code. So while existing laws do offer protection, they may fall short in addressing unconscious or implicit bias. Unconscious bias poses a unique challenge as it operates beneath the surface influencing decisions without explicit awareness, making it harder for the law to regulate. So there exist many myths to explain the underrepresentation of women in leadership positions. Two of them, currently on your screen, are that women are less ambitious and less qualified than men. However, contrary to these common misconceptions, the Women in the Workplace study reveals the reality. They found that 9 in 10 women under the age of 30 actually express a strong desire for promotion to the next level, and 3 in 4 aspire to attain senior leadership roles. Notably, roughly 80% of women, a significant increase from 70% back in 2019, expressed their ambition for the next level. Women of color were found to be the most ambitious, with 88% aspiring for promotions. In terms of qualifications, the pipeline for women leaders has expanded significantly over the last half century. Women now earn the majority of university degrees at every level except for professional degrees. So this underscores that the pipeline is rich with qualified and ambitious women, dispelling the unfounded notion that a shortage of skilled women exists. In my research, one of the key contributors to the underrepresentation of women in leadership positions was found to be the subtle but impactful force of unconscious bias. Before continuing on with the rest of the presentation, I thought we should go over what unconscious bias actually is. So the term unconscious bias, also referred to as implicit bias, refers to the unconscious assumptions, beliefs, attitudes, and stereotypes that human brains have about different groups. So these learned mental shortcuts affect how we perceive and respond to people. So unconscious bias occurs when a person consciously rejects stereotypes but still unconsciously makes evaluations based on stereotypes. Social psychologists Mazarine Banaji and Anthony Greenwald introduced the concept in 1995. They were building on earlier findings that showed an individual's actions are not always under their conscious control. So unconscious biases prevent us from seeing fairly and accurately the information or the people in front of us. So in organizational decision making, when decision makers are unaware of their biases, these biases can lead to certain groups being systematically favored, resulting in the exclusion of qualified individuals from positions and promotions. This not only undermines the principles of fairness and equality, but also perpetuates existing social inequalities. Recognizing and addressing unconscious biases is crucial for promoting unbiased decision making and creating more inclusive and equitable environments. In the remainder of this presentation, I will shine light on the following 3 specific unconscious biases that play a significant role in impacting women's advancement in the workplace. These include the implicit assumptions about leadership styles, which revolves around preconceived notions about effective leadership styles, often favoring traits traditionally associated with masculinity. The double-bind dilemma that refers to the challenges women face when balancing stereotypical masculine and feminine qualities, and finally the maternal wall and the baby effect, which are biases that revolve around the negative assumptions related to women's roles as mothers and potential future mothers. As awareness grows that gender is more complex than a simple male-female binary, deeply ingrained stereotypes about men and women continue to persist in cultural norms and influence perceptions in the workplace. Historically, men have dominated the workforce and leadership roles, perpetuating the view that stereotypically masculine leadership styles are superior to stereotypically feminine styles. Because men are seen as the prototypical leaders, women's leadership behaviors are evaluated against masculine leadership norms. Some traditionally masculine leadership traits include aggressiveness, decisiveness, being technical, strong, and competitive, and using rational and logical thinking, whereas feminine leadership traits include being submissive, quiet, caring, relational, nurturing, and being more emotional than men when it comes to their decision making. In 1968, Philip Goldberg conducted the groundbreaking Goldberg design, revealing how unconscious gender bias affects the evaluation of identical work based on whether it is perceived as male or female authored. Subsequent studies using this design consistently demonstrate bias in evaluating the competence, hireability, and salary expectations of women applicants compared to equally qualified men. In a 2009 systematic review by Carol Isaac, Barbara Lee, and Molly Carnes, studies employing the Goldberg design revealed that both male and female evaluators consistently rated women applicants lower for competence, hireability, and salary expectations, particularly in high status or leadership positions. So, despite these pervasive stereotypes, research highlights that women do possess excellent leadership qualities. One study identified 9 behaviors that enhance organizational performance, with women exhibiting traits like people development, expectations and rewards, role modeling, inspiration, and participative decision making. Ultimately, it is not women's leadership styles that need to change, as they have been proven to be effective when given the chance. What needs to change is how we view these stereotypically feminine leadership traits. The second type of unconscious bias women face in the workforce presents itself as the double-bind dilemma. The double-bind dilemma refers to a situation in which an individual or group faces conflicting and contradictory expectations, making it either difficult or impossible to fulfill both sets of expectations simultaneously. In a double bind, the person caught in the dilemma is often set up for failure, as meeting one expectation means violating the other. 3 double bind dilemmas are faced by women in the workplace. The first is extreme perceptions. Extreme perceptions refer to exaggerated or polarized views and judgments that individuals hold about a person, group, or situation. These perceptions are characterized by being at the extreme ends of a spectrum and often involve the oversimplification, generalization, or a lack of nuance. Women frequently encounter this double-bind dilemma, particularly where their behavior is perceived as either too soft or too tough. A prevailing excuse for the underrepresentation of women in leadership positions revolves around perceptions of emotionality. A 2016 study by Brescal unveiled a catch-22 scenario where women are criticized both for displaying too much emotion and not enough. The expectations for women to be warm and caring clash with the negative perceptions when they exhibit stereotypically masculine emotions, creating a challenging trade-off. Second is the high competency threshold. Women navigating leadership roles face elevated standards compared to their male counterparts. So not only do women struggle to be perceived as competent, they are also penalized for being too competent or simply seeking recognition for their competence. Research led by Madeline Hallman and others highlights this paradox where assertiveness in men is often seen as brilliance, while similar behavior in women may be viewed as distasteful. Similarly, Alice Eagley and Stephen Carew document that in some environments, men and women receive very different responses to self-promotion. Men are admired for knowing their worth, whereas women who behave similarly tend to be seen as arrogant. This poses a great dilemma for women seeking recognition for their competency. Finally, there is the dilemma of being competent but disliked. So women who do end up adopting a masculine leadership style are still viewed more negatively. So they may be viewed as competent because of their leadership style, but they'll receive more negative evaluations of their interpersonal skills than women who adopt a more feminine style. Even acting in counter-stereotypical ways has potential harmful consequences for women leaders. This poses a great issue because advancement in organization depends not only on competence assessments, but also on social acceptance and approval. The research emphasizes the crucial role of likability and leadership effectiveness, as individuals are less likely to trust or follow leaders whom they do not like, underscoring the far-reaching consequences of these double-blind dilemmas. The third unconscious bias that affects women's representation in leadership positions, and the final one to be discussed today, is the maternal wall and the maybe baby effect. So, the maternal wall is a set of biases and challenges that are faced by women in the workplace, particularly mothers or pregnant women. It is characterized as the negative assumptions and stereotypes that are related to women's caregiving responsibilities. So, women often are or often do bear the heavier household workloads, and this perceived conflict between caregiver and employee roles leads to working mothers and pregnant women being overlooked for promotions and excluded from leadership opportunities, as employers may assume that women's caregiving commitments make them inappropriate candidates for demanding leadership roles, as they question both their competence and their commitment. So, the maternal wall bias can be a significant barrier to career advancement of working mothers and pregnant women, as it reinforces stereotypes about their competence and commitment to their jobs. Fatherhood, on the other hand, seems to have the opposite effect, as men see an increase in their earnings when they become fathers. These are often referred to as motherhood penalty and the fatherhood bonus, respectively. The maybe baby effect investigates biases that are associated with pregnancy expectations. These are extended not only to pregnant women, but also to young childless women, based on the assumption and expectation that they may become mothers in the near future. So, employers may hold expectations about potential inconveniences, such as maternity leave, and may perceive a decrease in a woman's job commitment due to assumptions about future family planning. So, women who do not even have kids yet are also experiencing biases based on the maternal wall. So, through their 2021 study, Gluer and colleagues found that managers were more likely to offer less favorable employment conditions to women applicants who were of a childbearing age and who mentioned wanting children. More specifically, they were more likely to offer a limited work contract, limited benefits, and a temporary or conditional job contract. This study strongly showcases that women who are not even mothers or pregnant can suffer from the maternal wall biases that were once thought to only impact pregnant or mother employees. As mentioned earlier in this presentation, focusing on gender alone does not address issues related to the complexity of women's identities and experiences, and the need for inclusive practices to ensure that leadership roles are not just for women with traditional privileges. So, women of color experience what's known as a double jeopardy, because gender and racial stereotypes overlap to create unique challenges and barriers in their career advancement journey. Unfortunately, most of the research on the backlash against women's leadership has focused exclusively on white women. The question of how women of color fare when their leadership styles run counter to gender stereotypes has received very little attention, even though, as we can see from the Women in Leadership report, women of color are struggling more than white women when it comes to career advancement, and this is not for a lack of drive or motivation. One study by Rosette and colleagues in 2016 did analyze the stereotypes for Black and Asian American women in the workplace. Black women were perceived as dominant, intimidating, and hardworking, but not necessarily competent. Asian women were perceived as confident, but also very shy. So both groups had some positive aspects of the prototypical male leader, like being hardworking, but were still overlooked for leadership positions because of their perceived lack of competence and confidence, respectively. Although unconscious bias persists outside of our awareness, leaders can and should be able to recognize manage, and lessen its impact on the workplace. By understanding how biases influence our daily decisions, we can cultivate a culture of awareness. Recognizing the existence of unconscious bias is the first step towards minimizing its influence on decision making processes. There is compelling evidence that unconscious bias training works. The 2019 edition of the Women in the Workplace report found that for companies with smaller gender disparities in representation, half of the employees had received unconscious bias training in the past year, compared to only a quarter of employees in companies that aren't making progress closing these gaps. Another possible step is to implement gender quotas. Norway has adopted a quota system for very large companies, requiring 40% female representation on corporate boards, and many other countries have since followed suit. Gender quotas do have their limitations, as those selected by the quota programs may be stereotyped as less qualified and face backlash from individuals who feel their choices are being restricted in order to promote women. However, these are types of backlash women are already facing. Studies have also found that women's advancement is strongly linked to board gender diversity. So, to increase the number of women in top leadership positions in the long run, we need to increase the number of women in leadership positions now, something that gender quotas can help achieve. Recognizing the importance of addressing unconscious bias in the workplace and the law's struggle to do so up till now, it is worth considering creating a legal requirement for decision makers to undergo training and implementing gender quotas, especially for those hiring at the managerial level. Thank you for listening to my presentation.